Hey everybody, welcome back to Save Me Jeebus for the third time in a row!
Oh, save me, Jebus!
Yes, everybody, we've made it to week 3 of Save Me Jeebus, or episode 3. God, man, every week I look forward to recording these because it's just a lot of fun. Old Simpsons is such a treat to everything that follows. And to kind of go back to the beginning of an entire series such as The Simpsons and watch it from where it started, it sure is a treat. So if you, dear listeners, are going back to rewatch The Simpsons alongside this weekly show, man, you guys are in for a treat. and if this podcast can motivate any of you guys to go back and rewatch it, I mean, that's all I can ask for, because a show such as The Simpsons is going back and seeing the way everything started. It was such a monumental show at its time, and to kind of go back and recapture some or revisit some of the magic that took the world by storm back then. Man, what a treat. All right, so and the reason that I bring this up is because this episode focuses in on something that I had no idea existed. I'm certain that I have watched this episode before because the plot is very familiar. I know that I've seen this episode, but I just did not know this about what was going on in this episode. And I guess to not jump around my words and just kind of go out there and say it, well, this is the episode where Homer becomes a safety inspector. What? Yeah, I always thought that Homer was always a safety inspector, but that turns out to not be the case. And what I mean by this is that, well, I guess let's just kind of jump into it, right? Alright, so the Bart gag, the chalk gag, as I said that I was going to start rating them, this week's it was, I will not skateboard in the halls. And I guess it's okay, but it was kind of when I read this chalk gag that I realized that, yeah, a lot of these aren't going to be that great. I don't know, if maybe I'll continue them into next week, maybe I won't, I don't know. But this one was definitely weak. It's a definitely 2 out of 5. Very low 2, maybe really high 1. It was okay. I mean, the only reason I liked it was because after you see him run out the classroom, you do see Bart jump into the street with the skateboard, like he was already riding the skateboard. So I guess it works. All right, and for the couch gag, man, I completely blanked out on the couch gag the first time that I watched the episode. I wrote in my notes originally just a bunch of question marks because I couldn't remember what it was, and so I had to go back and rewatch it at the end of the episode when I realized that I had no idea what it was. But anyways, the couch gag was basically the family just squeezing into the couch and the couch just falls apart. Like all the pieces just fly in different directions and the Simpsons just fall to the floor. And that was, I mean, I guess the fact that I completely blanked on it just kind of says that it was generally weak. It did make me kind of go, but I think that's being a little too kind. So I'm gonna give that one I'm gonna also give it a 2 out of 5. It's not the best, All right, so all right, and from there we'll go ahead and jump into the episode. So the episode starts off with Bart's class getting ready to go on a field trip. Mrs. Krabappel talking to the class and telling them they all need to behave and yada yada. Otto pulls up in the bus and Bart goes up to him and says, "Hey, Otto man," and he's like, "What's up, Bart man?" or something like that. And Bart basically asks him if he has any tattoos, and he pulls up his sleeve and he goes, "Yeah, I woke up this morning with this one," and it's like was it a skull, a flaming skull? I think that's what it was. And Bart says, "Man, I really want one," and so I guess Bart hasn't forgotten about the tattoo from episode 1. I guess he still really wants one. And Otto says something very strange. He says, not until you're 14. So, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean that, like, the age appropriate for a kid to get a tattoo is 14? Wherever Bart lives? Or is it just Otto being dumb? It kind of confused me for a minute. Not until you're 14. I don't know. I don't really get it. I'm just gonna go with just Otto being completely just absent-minded. But I know that kids have gotten tattoos or piercings as early as that. I know that that's a thing. So I don't want to play dumb and be like, you know. But anyways, I'm too caught up on that. All right. So Bart and the class, they get into the bus. Bart is he's not really happy because he needs to sit next to the spazzy kid that throws up on the bus. I guess he gets motion sick. And the teacher tells him that if he doesn't behave, that she's going to make him sing. And this is where we get the introduction to the twins, Sherry and Terry. And I'm kind of picking up on Bart being antagonized by his classmates. Last week we had Martin Prince, and this week we have the twins, Sherry and Terry. And I'm kind of wondering if this is going to be a running theme, at least through the first season. We'll see next week. But for now, Sherry and Terry are this week's antagonists. And what I mean by that is that the twins pop out from behind Bart, and they tell him, "We're gonna make you sing, Bart Simpson. Yeah, we're gonna make you sing." And they kiss him. Both kiss him on each side of the cheek, and he inevitably screams. And so the next scene is when he see him singing. So they make it to the power plant. The power plant is where the field trip is today, and I didn't quite catch that right away. I don't remember them saying it in the beginning when Krabappel was talking to them outside of the school. So if I missed it, I guess I missed it. I was pleasantly surprised by the location because when Otto starts driving, the very first scene that we see them pass by is the nuclear power plant. And he keeps driving, and then he keeps going to other locations. And by some chance, they end up passing the school again. And Krabappel asks him, like, "Hey, do you know where you're even going?" And he goes, "Don't worry, Mrs. K, this is a shortcut." All right. All right. So, well, that was a surprise. So the kids get off, and we're greeted with the introduction of Mr. Smithers. Wait. Black Mr. Smithers. Man, that sure was a thing. And Black Mr. Smithers is the reason that I know that I've seen this episode, because even when I was a kid, I was surprised by this. I think a lot of people were surprised by this, and I don't understand why this was an error. I mean, I know that in shows like Dragon Ball Z, when Vegeta shows up for the first time, he has like brown hair, and Toriyama calls up the animation studio and tells them, "No, all Saiyans have black hair. You need to fix that." And so then we see Vegeta with black hair 2 episodes later or something like that. But I don't know why this was an error in The Simpsons. I mean, this is the introduction to the character, and it's not even like immediately evident that he's Mr. Burns' right-hand man. So I kind of wondering, why didn't Mr. Smithers stay black? And if anybody has an answer, please let me know in the comments. But moving on. Alright, so Mr. Smithers shows the kids this movie about nuclear power and kind of an introduction to it. And I thought it was really funny because the little nuclear power mascot is introducing the concept, and then at the end of the movie, there seems to be some nuclear waste that pops out, and then the movie acknowledges it. Like, "Oh, here's some nuclear waste. Well, this is what we do. We usually just pick up a rug and just kind of sweep it under there and pretend that it doesn't exist, at least for 1,000,000 years or something like that." And I thought that was just so good. It was so good of the show to just go ahead and acknowledge that nuclear waste is a real thing, and then have it acknowledge within the movie of the power plant of the show. Like, it's not, I don't know, it's just clever Simpsons writing. And so the kids they're on tour, and Sherry and Terry approach Bart and says, "Hey, our dad says that your dad is incompetent." And Bart's like, "What's incompetent mean?" And then it's like, "Oh, that just means that your dad just sits around and eats donuts and doesn't do anything," or something like that. And Bart's like, "Oh, okay. Well, I thought you were putting him down." Oh man, oh Bart. And then that's exactly what we see Homer do. So then we see Homer, he's like, "Hey, my kid's coming, and I gotta go where the action's at, so that my kid can see me being really cool." And Homer, trying to be cool, he ends up crashing into some part of the power plant where some steam just blows off. It wasn't anything crazy, but he ends up getting fired by Sherry and Terry's father. Oh man. And it was funny because it's like just some generic character, kind of just like, yeah, Sherry and Terry's father. That character is gonna be irrelevant. Who cares? And I don't think we ever actually see that character again. But yeah, so Homer starts looking for a new job. He can't find anything. Everyone starts to slam the door in his face, and even Bart does at one point. And you see him apply at other power plants. I think at a barber shop, at a restaurant or something. And then you see the door to the house, and then the door slammed in his face, and then Bart opens it, and he says, "Don't give up, Dad." And from there, Homer goes to the bar, to Moe's Tavern. And this is where we get the first Moe crank call. And what was it? Oh my gosh. Okay, so for the first crank call in the show, Bart calls, and he says, "Hey, is Mr. Freely there?" And then, who? First name IP. So then Moe goes, "IP Freely here? Hey, everybody, IP Freely." Yeah. So Homer goes, "You'll get that punk someday, Moe." And then Homer wants to buy another beer, but then he doesn't have enough. He doesn't have any money to buy another one. So he asks Moe if he can let him slide on this one, and Moe says no. He asks why, and Moe very candidly says, "Well, it's because I don't think that you're gonna get another job." And right here is kind of my problem with Moe. Moe is not my favorite character on the show. I mean, there's so many characters anyways, so to not like Moe is to just kind of be like, whatever, right? But Moe is a character that has a lot of development compared to like Lenny and Carl, right? And I guess it's kind of the point of what Moe is. But every time that the show decides to focus on Moe, like how the plot revolve around him, I tend to like him just a little less. Because he's such a sleazebag. He's a sleazebag in every way. And to kind of kick Homer down here, well, the point is that I just don't like Moe. So later on that night, Homer can't sleep. She says, "My old boss said that after we got married that I can go back anytime I wanted." And Homer says, "It was like, can you still do that?" And Marge says, like, "Sure I can. It's like riding a bike." So then the next scene is, it's Marge in an old drive-in restaurant location where she's like dressed up as a maid, wearing the not a maid. She's dressed up as a waitress in skates, and she's like really unhappy about it. She does the classical that thing that she does when she's not into something. So that was really funny. I think that was a good Marge moment for someone who's been relatively just in the background so far in these past 3 episodes. This was a good little joke for Marge. So after that, pretty much Homer just lays on the couch defeated. He is just going downhill, like really hard, and he's on the couch defeated. Bart uses this as an opportunity to get Homer to sign the report card. And he has like the TV playing, I guess like an unemployment network or something. And there was like a joke about like, hey, when we get back, we'll continue to give you tips for winning the lottery or something like that. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, that was a little dumb, a little funny dumb. And Homer gets an ad for Duff beer, and he goes, "Yeah, you know what? That's what's gonna make all of this go away. Beer." So he tries to turn to alcoholism, but he doesn't have any money. So he goes into the fridge hoping to find something, and Homer finds a cake that says, "Don't worry, Dad, we love you anyway." He goes, "Damn," yeah, and he throws it over his shoulder. Oh gosh. As I mentioned, this is an episode of Homer just descending further down. And so from here, Homer resorts to stealing from his kid. He takes Bart's piggy bank as he's sleeping and he smashes it. And this is when he realizes what he's done. He's like, "What am I doing? I just smashed my kid's piggy bank. It's not even enough to buy a beer." And then he's like, "Wait, hold on, let me make sure." And then he counts it and he's like, "No, there's not even enough to count. I mean, there's not even enough to buy a beer." And from here, Homer, I guess he hits rock bottom. He feels that the only solution to this is to just end it all. So he reaches for a note and he writes his suicide note. And it's the first one in the show, because I know that they do this from time to time, because as a kid I remember Homer always writing the line, "By the time you read this, I'll be so and so or such and such." And that always stuck out to me as a kid. I don't know why, but it just did. So I know that this is a thing that happens more and more throughout the show, or a few more times later on in the show. But here we have our first one. And Homer decides that he's going to end his life by tying himself to a rock. And so he's carrying the boulder and he's walking out the backyard. But before he does, he makes sure to oil the hinges on the squeaky fence. Oh man. But yeah, so he carries his rock and he's like, "Man, even doing this is hard." And so he gets to the bridge. As the family realizes what Homer's going to do. So they chase after him. He says, "By the time you read this, I'll be in a watery grave." So the family knew that he was probably going to try and drown himself. When he gets there, he finds a rock already at the bridge. And he goes, what does he say? Dang, I forgot to write it down. But he says something like, something about living and learning or something. But anyways, the family calls out to him saying, "Hey Dad, don't do this." And as they're running and chasing after him, Homer realizes that there's a car that's about to run them over. And I don't know how he was fast enough to do this, considering that he has a boulder tied to him. He manages to push the family out of the way and saves them. And Marge tells him, "I can't believe you're going to kill yourself." He says, "Kill myself? That's the last thing I will do," because he realizes he had an epiphany. He had an epiphany as he said, "Boy, somebody should put a stop sign here." And that's when he had his little moment, his epiphany, his reason to live. He will not rest until this street gets a stop sign. And so when he goes to the city hall meetings or whatever to propose his idea, Chief Wiggum comes out. I think that this is actually Chief Wiggum's first appearance. But he comes out, he wants to warn everybody about the graffiti bandit known as El Barto. And oh man, and I heard that, I was like, oh gosh, that's really funny. But then they continue the joke by passing out a police sketch of what they think that El Barto looks like. And it's like just an older, scummier looking version of Bart. And then Bart sees it and he's like, cool. And then Homer sees it. He's like, man, I sure wouldn't want to be found in an alley with this guy. So Homer proposes his idea and he gets the stop sign. Then he continues and he gets a speed bump. And then he gets a sign stating that there's a sign ahead. And all of this is in the newspaper. It's like the way that we find out that Homer gets more signs is that it becomes local news. And then after that, we see the whole park just covered in signs. And Marge is proud of him. And he seems to be doing okay now. But he's unsatisfied because there's a real problem. And he points to the power plant. And he says, I'm going to go after them because no one is safe as long as we have this here. So Homer's not trying to get a job anymore. And I'm sure that putting up these signs isn't paying him. So who's providing for the family? Well, we get an answer just a little bit later. So yeah, basically Homer's just an activist at this point. And and I wrote in my notes, Homer is an activist, but what the hell is he doing for money? So he starts the protest right outside, and we see Mr. Burns, and he legitimately feels evil. He feels very dangerous. And when I get the opportunity to talk a little bit more about Mr. Burns, I'm going to tell you why exactly I love him. But for now, let's just leave it at he just feels very evil. So he asks who this guy is, and Smithers tells him that he's Homer Simpson. He used to work here, but we fired him because he was really incompetent. So he's like, okay, well, I want to talk to him in private. So he gets Homer to come in, and he tells him, hey, if you stop the protest, you can return to the plant. And Homer says no. And so Burns offers him a safety inspector position, and instead of being a technical supervisor, which is made a point to be told to the audience throughout the episode. When he's first fired, he's like, I'm not anything special. I'm just a technical supervisor. So no one's going to want to hire me. And of course, nobody wanted to hire him. He's like, I'm not even a supervisor of anything technical. I'm just a technical supervisor. And I had to kind of think about that one for a sec. But yeah. As Mr. Burns is giving Homer the opportunity to think about the position, Homer is thinking to himself, and he says, well, if I take this job, Marge can stop supporting the family. So, hey, Marge never stopped working, I guess. But yeah, so he says, what the hey, I'll take the job. And the first thing that Mr. Burns tells him is like, all right, well then go outside and tell that crowd that this plant is safe. And so he goes out there. Just as he's about to kind of cave in and tell everybody, he goes back inside and he chickens out. He decides to choose the high ground, but unknowingly. Cause Mr. Burns says, wow, would you really choose your own morality over a secure job and a raise or something like that? Yeah, I guess that is pretty mumbo jumbo of me, huh? He says, I'm going to use up every free minute I have to make sure that this city is safe. But of course, if you give me a job, I'll have less of those minutes. And this impresses Mr. Burns. He's like, hey, well, I guess you're not as stupid as you look or sound or test. So he decides to give them a job. And then he goes out there and he tells the crowd, they all need to learn to depend on themselves for safety. But because he has a job now, and his job is to make sure that this plant is safe. Even though it is continuously acknowledged that Homer is the reason that the plant has had multiple occasions of backfire, of accidents and stuff. I mean, it's even acknowledged in the opening of the show. And Homer's like, hey, I know that I'm gonna cause accidents. What the heck? I'll take the job. He tells everybody that his job now is to make sure that the plant is safe. And the crowd cheers for him. At first I thought that they were booing, but no, they were cheering for him. And Homer falls off the balcony and the crowd saves him. And the episode ends with everybody cheering for Homer as they're carrying him. And that's the end of the episode. Overall, this episode was like a V shape. It was the fall of Homer Simpson. I guess kind of hensing the title, Homer's Odyssey. As Homer just declines into depression, declines into the madness that goes with being unemployed and having to support a family. And just when he thinks that he's hit rock bottom and he's just ready to end his life, he finds a spark, something to carry him on. And the episode ends with him doing good to the point where he goes back to where he's working, but now with a new position. And a position that he will have for the rest of the show. I mean, everybody knows Homer Simpson as the safety inspector at the nuclear power plant. It was a good episode. The episode was good. There wasn't a whole lot of laugh out loud moments, but they definitely were there. My favorite jokes were the Marge moment where she goes back to work, and it's a very quick joke. If you're not paying attention, you'll definitely miss it. But I loved it. It made me love Marge in that moment. And then definitely my favorite standout joke is the El Barto Bandit and the sketch of what the police thinks that El Barto looks like. Alright, join us next week for episode 4 of Save Me Jeebus, where we'll be covering episode 4 of The Simpsons. There's no disgrace like home. After seeing families being nice to each other at a company picnic, Homer orders the Simpsons to a family therapist. And I can already remember what this episode is if you guys have seen the therapy episode. So I'll see you guys then. Bye, cha.